Hey everyone, Andrew back for another Barista Basics video. So as we can see, I am inside, which is a bit of a downer because it is absolutely gorgeous outside, like absolutely gorgeous. Not too hot, but warm enough. Um, it's absolutely gorgeous. And so of course I would love to film outside, but of course I live on a crowded residential street in New Jersey, so I have lots of neighbors, and as a result of this beautiful weather, they are outside, enjoying the beautiful weather, talking amongst their friends, whatever, which is great, and that's what I'm about to do once I finish filming this video. But for the purposes of the video, it is not necessarily ideal. It's a bit too distracting, I found. So that is why I am sadly inside today. But I guess it's sort of a blessing in disguise because I do have a cheat sheet here and it is a little bit windy out and we have seen how that plays out. So maybe it's a good thing that I actually end up having to film inside. So we are just throwing it back to the OG format with a cheat sheet, me being inside, and everything. So, as you can tell from the title, to get actually into the video, we are learning about sugar and its most common substitutes. So, we can go ahead and get into it. Like I said, I have a nifty little cheat sheet here. So, I have listed 3 kinds of sugar that I find are the most common in coffee shops. So, I have split these sugars evenly, 3 and 3, into 2 sort of main categories. We have natural sweeteners and artificial sweeteners. So, of course, we will first start with the most common, the most widely consumed type of natural sweetener, which is white sugar, tabletop sugar, granulated sugar, however you call it. It's also broadly known as refined sugar, and that also includes brown sugars and stuff, but those are more for baking, not so much for sweetening up your coffee. So I have just decided to narrow it to specifically white granulated sugar. So, to explain essentially what it is made from the sugarcane plant by extension. So, as we can see here, it's made from crude raw sugar, which is different than the raw sugar that I have listed right below it, which is also referred to as turbinado sugar. So, what I'm going to do is actually go ahead and just skip over the white and explain the raw sugar, and that will reveal sort of the difference between crude raw sugar and actual raw sugar. So, to speak on the raw sugar, as I mentioned, it is also referred to as turbinado sugar. It has a bunch of other names, but that's the name that I've heard it referred to the most. And this is made from cane juice. So, essentially, what happens is the sugarcane plant is harvested and then it is pressed so that the juice, the sweetness, comes out. Now, this juice is concentrated and refined and undergoes a process called, it's centrifuged. I'm not really sure what that means. I think that's like where it gets like spun around something, I'm pretty sure. I'm not a chemist nor a physicist, so I'm a little unaware, but I know that it's centrifuged, and the point of that is that it removes most of the molasses, but not all of it. And so, as we know, molasses is a very thick, dark brown, very viscous substance that is very sweet. So that is why the raw sugar is sort of an off brown color because it still contains a little bit of that molasses in there. Now, after it is centrifuged and, refined, it undergoes a process of single crystallization, which is why the granules of raw sugar are much bigger than that compared to our white sugar, for example. So that is the raw sugar. Now, how this raw sugar is separate from the crude raw sugar is essentially they both undergo the same process where the sugarcane plant is pressed and its juice is extracted. But, so I guess, actually, okay, this is a good way to think about it. So, the raw sugar that is marketed that we consume is sort of like the good product, whereas the crude raw sugar, which is used to make the white tabletop sugar, is sort of the bad byproduct. It has a lot of impurities in it. It's not really suitable for human consumption on its own, which is why it goes through these multiple refining processes, crystallization processes to create the white sugar. So essentially, you could think of the white sugar as sort of making the best of a byproduct that isn't, it's essentially the company's like, okay, we have this great raw sugar, and then we have this not so good crude raw sugar. Let's go ahead and try to make the most of the situation and try to make something out of it. That's what white sugar is. Um, Not to talk smack on, some white sugar. I love some white sugar, but that's what it is. So to sort of get back to that, as I said, it is much more refined. It undergoes many more refining processes than the regular raw sugar. And it also goes through multiple crystallization processes, which is why the white sugar crystals, the granulated sugar, is much smaller than the raw sugar crystals. So I hope that that distinction between the crude raw sugar and the raw sugar that we consume was clear. I have been kind of going back and forth in my head before filming this about how I was going to explain that, so I hope I did an adequate job. But we can go ahead and move on to our last natural sweetener, which is stevia. So, as I mentioned, the white sugar and the raw sugar are made from the sugarcane plant and as such contain sucrose. Whereas stevia is, of course, a natural sweetener, so it's also made from a plant, but it's made from a different plant. It's made from the leaves of the Stevia rebaudiana. I Googled how to pronounce that, and it was by a British person, so I don't know if that's actually how it's pronounced, but I tried my best. But yeah, so it is made from the leaves of that plant, and it is 30 to 150 times sweeter than that of the cane sugar, which again, as I mentioned, is sucrose. Um, Between honestly all of these sweeteners that I have listed on here, I think stevia is the best bet because it is also low calorie. Um, and it is the only low calorie sweetener on this list that is natural. So obviously, in my opinion, I think I think most people would agree, natural is better than artificial concerning stuff you're putting into your body. So my vote is for stevia, even though I rarely consume it. I, like I said, opt for the white sugar. But that's neither here nor there. In theory, stevia, she's the best bet. So yeah, those are our three natural sweeteners. Now we can go ahead and move on to our three artificial sweeteners. Now, all of these are pretty similar. Obviously, they're artificial sweeteners, so they are man-made. Splenda's sort of, we'll get into that, but especially the first two are like completely 100% man-made, like not derived from any sort of natural substance. So to get into those, our first one here is Sweet and Low. Now this is the most colloquial, familiar name for saccharin, which is a type of, compound, obviously, a molecule that I can't really explain the chemistry behind how it is created. I tried to read it. Same for the aspartame, and it just literally went over my head. The chemistry involved in the caffeine video was more than enough for me. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure how saccharin is actually created, like, the chemical processes that it undergoes. I tried to understand it, but it went over my head, so we're just gonna have to make do with what we got. But yes, so Sweet and Low is saccharin, and it is 300 to 400 times sweeter than sucrose. Moving on to Equal, this was also called NutraSweet back when it was first introduced. I think sometime in like the early 80s, I'm pretty sure. So you may be familiar with that term. But it is made from aspartame, which of course is another totally manufactured man-made chemical compound, and it is only 200 times sweeter than sucrose. Now, to move on to our final friend here, Splenda. This one, in my opinion, it technically is an artificial sweetener, but I think it's sort of like a pseudo one because it is actually derived from sucrose. So as we can see, Splenda is made from sucralose, which is made by the chlorination of sucrose. Again, I'm not entirely sure what chlorination means, but that is the process that it undergoes to create sucralose. And so Splenda is 320 to 1,000 times, literally, you read that right, 1,000 times sweeter than sucrose or cane sugar. It is 3 times sweeter than aspartame, which is our equal, and it is 2 times sweeter than our saccharin, which is our sweet and low. So if you're looking for the sweetest, sweetener on this list, definitely go for the Splenda because it is super, super duper crazy sweet. But yeah, so that is all for the cheat sheet. I have sort of covered all that the cheat sheet can offer. Now, what I'd like to talk about is sort of some, I guess, misconceptions about sort of these artificial sweeteners. Now, this isn't really applicable for like the purposes of a coffee shop. If you opt for a stevia or a sweet and low over a domino sugar, it's better for you in the sense of, it's little to no calories and you're cutting down on your sugar intake. What I'm going to talk about is basically kind of more so applies for like diet sodas and stuff, diet soft drinks. But I guess it could also, by extension be applied to the use of these artificial sweeteners in a coffee house setting. But to get into it, I remember hearing, for as long as I can remember, that artificial sweeteners like give you cancer and that they're, they're really not as healthy for you as, people make them out to be, which is kind of true. They, the cancer part is not true. At least from the sources I read, that is a misconception that has been disputed and disproved. They do not give you cancer, directly. I guess we can get into, how it could possibly give you cancer. But so the main problem with these artificial sweeteners, there's 2 main reasons. The first one being that, obviously, as I described and as you saw in the cheat sheet, these artificial sweeteners are super, 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 like, crazy sweeter than the actual, cane sugar itself, the sucrose, which is kind of a double-edged sword, because it means that you don't have to use as much artificial sweetener as you would for, actual sugar, which is a good thing. But at the same time, since they are so concentrated in terms of sweetness, they can essentially sort of overstimulate, your taste receptors that are responsible for sweetness. So this becomes an issue where it can literally make less sweet things taste not good to you at all. Like, essentially, you overstimulate these taste buds so much that the only way that you're gonna find sweetness comparable to that is through the artificial sweetener, like the sweetness of, some sort of fruit or whatever. Even a really sweet fruit is not going to taste very sweet because your taste buds are so used to this super crazy sweet sweetener. Now, another reason why these artificial sweeteners are pretty dangerous, and this is what really relates to diet sodas, is that, people will consume, a diet soda, for example, and be like, okay, I didn't have any sugar with that, so now I can go ahead and treat myself with, like a piece of cake or something, a sweet. Which, in moderation is fine, of course. Anything in moderation is okay. But the issue is, people kind of take that thinking to the extreme and they're like, okay, I can basically eat whatever I want that's not very healthy because I'm drinking diet soda. And obviously, there are other negative side effects of consuming a lot of soda other than just the amount of sugar you would consume otherwise. But yeah, so that's why, sort of these artificial sweeteners are dangerous. And then, of course, how it kind of relates to how it could give you cancer, not, directly, but, if you lead that kind of lifestyle, if you drink like, a whole, I mean, I don't think people actually do this, but, like a whole 12 pack or a 24 pack of, Diet Coke every day or, every couple of days or whatever, that is not healthy for you, simply put, and it can have some detrimental effects on your health. And these detrimental effects, of course, then can cause some sort of health concern to arise, one of them being cancer. But that, I'm not a doctor or anything, so I really don't think that it is, it's not a common occurrence per se, but for example, having some sort of heart disease or like high blood pressure or something, that would be a more sort of common consequence of that. But it has had that really scary consequence as well. So these are all just things that I think are important and that should be kept in mind when you are consuming these artificial sweeteners. They are better for you in one sense, like I said, if you're diabetic, for example, these artificial sweeteners would be great for you because there's no carbs, there's no sugar, and there's also no calories. So if you're trying to lose weight, cut back on your sugar, they're great for that. But also just, moderation is important. So don't go overboard with the amount of artificial sweetener you consume, which can also be said for the amount of sugar you consume. The actual natural sweeteners, you don't want to consume too much of that either. Moderation, essentially, I think all of this can be summarized just with the word moderation is key. But yeah, so that was my little diatribe on artificial sweeteners. Yeah, so that's it for the video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you are doing well, of course, staying safe, sane, healthy, entertained, motivated as well. That is something I think I'd like to start adding on to, like, when I say my little shtick at the end, because, in quarantine, when you're stuck at home all the time, and especially if you're not working even, it's really hard to stay motivated, because if you're at home, you're just like, oh, I want to lay in bed and watch Netflix, whatever. But I really hope that you were staying motivated, maybe using this time to take up a new hobby, a new passion, a new interest, perhaps. Yeah, and to summarize, I just hope that you're doing well and that you are continuing to be smart and safe and wear a mask if you go out in public and only go out in public for essential tasks, practicing coronavirus safety procedures, etc. Catch my breath. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you guys. And again, I hope you're doing well. And I will see you on Saturday for the newest part of Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. I'm absolutely loving that game already. I'm confused, which is a good thing because the storytelling is good. But I have a feeling I'm going to be less confused by the end of the next part. So I hope that you will stick around for that. And yeah, I just hope you guys take care until then. See you soon.